So this week's project turned into a much bigger effort than expected. My daughter wanted to replace her nightstand, and of course she wanted an epoxy river table. I've never done that before. Not a big fan, but we did that. So I ended up breaking this video into two parts. So the first part is building the walnut bottom, the legs, the drawers, the shelf, all the cabinetry, the joinery in there. And then the second part is the epoxy river table on the top, because that was a whole effort pouring it, flattening the slab. So I'm going to link both of them so that you can go between each one depending on which one you start with. And so this is the second video where we're actually doing the epoxy river table laminate. You'll see a little bit of overlap when I'm actually joining the top, just so you can kind of get an idea of how it was done. But it's mostly about pouring the epoxy, letting it cure, taking it out of the mold. Spoiler alert, I forgot to put mold release on there, so it's quite an effort getting it off, but flattening it, sanding it, getting it all prepared to then attach it to the bottom. Here's the layout of the pieces that we use for the tabletop, and just kind of working, getting the order, the pattern that I like the best. So this is how we connected them. Used the three pieces, got domino. Of course, daughter enjoyed this, working with the power tools, get some good inspection of it, just showing you how the domino, the tenon works in there. And then we work through getting all three panels connected together. And then once got in, just tried some dry fitting. Had a little bit of time for a Macarena dance while they were waiting. But of course, the favorite part here was just hammering in the tenons and getting it dry fitted. Once we tested it out, made sure it worked, I worked on gluing it up. So I put the glue on, she spread it out, I put the tenons in, the dominoes, and we got it all lined up. This just helped line it up. I used a dark glue here just to hide any imperfections as well. And then got it in the clamps, clamped it all down, and then by the next day it was good. So I use the bandsaw to kind of follow that imperfections line of the rotten wood, but just kind of use that grain to just exaggerate or accentuate the markings there, just so we could see on the river. And you can see once we cut it up there, put it apart, and that was what became the river. And then just used a chisel to get rid of all the dead rotten wood and anything loose inside of there that would have caused problems and come off an epoxy. And then use the Dremel just to kind of finish it off, get down into we wanted to leave those features because you can kind of see through. And then I used the drum kind of sander on the Dremel just to smooth it out, all the edges for the bandsaw cuts, and this really helped. And it had a little imperfection here, another one, just kind of another one, but I obviously wanted to use that to accentuate it. And so got some tape on there, some tuck tape, just to kind of keep it from any CA glue from coming out. I didn't want to put epoxy because it wasn't enough there, but I just used CA glue with the activator. Kind of like I'll show you a little bit later, I do with a knot. And so just kind of got it in there, worked it in there a little bit, and then got a pick as well, and kind of got it in there deep inside, and then made a couple passes. So get the CA glue in there, hit it with the activator, sand it off a little bit. Here's an example where I did it with a knot, where I had some splits in there. You can see sort of just cutting them off, just accentuate it. And so you get it all into the cuts, activate it so it becomes hard, sand it down, just do several layers till you get it all the way up to the surface area, and then you just keep sanding it down in between. And what you end up with is a nice decorative kind of feature here that looks like it was originally part of the wood. So I did that on that crack as well. And then started off making a form here with laminate. So cut it to the exact size, or as close as I could, within like a 1/16 of an inch or so of what I wanted the river to be, or the tabletop to be, with the river and the corners pushed out. And then so put caulk silicone in all the joints, and then screwed all the pieces in. So I ended up with a box. And you can see as I screw it down that it gets completely sealed. So I wanted to make a complete box there, and then put it in there so you can see it's just about tight, just to minimize any loss or leakage around the outsides. And then got it lined up, and that's about the size I wanted for the river in between. And then made a little dam so that if it ran over, it didn't run across everything, and also so we could line it up to the top. So this was a 2-part deep pour epoxy, so 2 parts of the first, the larger, and then the activator is 1 part of this. So we got this mixed up into a container, and then make sure you stir it very vigorously. And of course, when I wasn't paying attention, there's a lot of smugging, face laughing, but as soon as I came back, yeah, back to business. So we mixed it all up good with the stir for about 5 minutes, and then actually scraped off the sides, moved it to a different container, and then sealed the inside. And this is, or the wood, and this is one of the mistakes I made. I didn't let it dry enough, so I ended up with some bubbles. I think that's where it mostly came from, but the helper was able to get in on, and of course kids love painting. And then we mixed in the blue mica powder, and then we wanted it to be a little bit transparent, so because one of the features is we put some fish in there, so you can still see the red stir through this. So it was enough of blue, but also transparent. And here was the exciting part that I've been waiting for the whole time, is to lay the fish in here. So we got these little plastic fish that were small, that we thought would be interesting. But as soon as they float, I was worried about them sinking, or sorry, they sink, but I was worried about them floating, but ended up, they just went everywhere. So every time I tried a couple different options of trying to pour it, different places, they just went all over the place. So I ended up just pouring it, filling in here. You can see by our faces, it's not working very well. And then just using kind of popsicle sticks and moving them around as best we could. And then hit it with the heat gun and just get rid of all the bubbles. Like I said, I had a little bit of trouble with the bubbles coming in. I think it was cold as well. So it didn't come out perfect, but it was good enough. So again, just kind of stirring the fish, kind of keep them in there, but also trying to make a little bit of decoration of the mica powder in there, just to don't end up with just a static pattern. And then once I got it, left it for, I think it was like 3 or 4 days, had to harden. Then I needed to make a sled for the router because I needed to sand it or flatten the slab. So I created a sled that will sit right on top, and I made it specifically, or left it like it was, so that we could actually use it for dual purpose like this. So I ended up cutting the sled, and then I need to make a hole down the middle where the router would go. And this is so I used a table saw to make a couple cuts on the interior of it, and then ended up using a pull saw and a saber saw or jigsaw and a couple different options just to, here's the pull saw, just to kind of trim saw, just kind of finish it a little bit, and then the jigsaw just to finish it off, just to make the square opening. So this is where the router bit is going to sit through here. You can see here's the sled with the sides on it, what it looks like. So I made this, and so this is going to sit on top and ride on the form, and then the router bit's going to go through here and cut the slab and finish it. Okay, so I'm going to try to flatten this slab out. Got the epoxy in here, but it's a little edge. Using the sled I made, using this 2-inch flattening bit, or slab flattening CNC bit. Show it here. It's quite terrifying. So hand holding this thing, I'm worried what it's going to do and what it's going to do. Hopefully it doesn't tear up my slab I've been working on for hours, but I'm going to try it out. Here it is in action. I got the bit in there, put it on the sled, and ran it back and forth, trying it out. It worked pretty good. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't completely flat. You can see here it kind of gouged it out a little bit more. Didn't hit it the river part with the epoxy exactly like I wanted it, but it wasn't too bad. I knew it wasn't going to be perfect, but it was good enough just to get it smooth so that I could come back with a sander, trying to sand it down the amount of wood that I would have had to take it out, because it was probably a 1/16 of an inch from the walnut down to the epoxy. So So I hit it with the Rotex sander and the Rotex Mould with 80 grit, and it just went by pretty quickly. It wasn't too bad. It's a little bit rough on the wood and on the epoxy, but that's what I expected. So I went back with the less aggressive ETS sander here just to kind of get it smooth. And you notice I left the sides on here. It's because I made a mistake and forgot to put the release agent. So I just kept putting off and putting off trying to get the sides off because I knew it was going to be terrible. So you can see the router bit couldn't get all the way into the edges, but it's fine. I was going to take care of that. So here's where I finally just tried to get this off, and you can see why you put release agent on here because it's a mess. So I tried this a couple of times. I figured, let me see if I can, how much I would have to do on this. And I did this for about 10 minutes and then realized I needed a different, much more aggressive approach. So I figured I'd just use the track saw and just cut it off. So I made a first pass here, just kind of get through most of the laminate, and then went back and lowered it the rest of the way and went through the whole thing. So I just cut off the edge, made just to trim a little bit of the top, as you can see here. That's much easier than that, trying to hit it. So I hit all 4 edges and then went back to get, so I got all 4 edges off of there and then went back with a planer here and just kind of flattened out the parts where I couldn't get to with the router bit. Well, it wasn't too bad. So I from both sides and just flattened it out. And then it still wasn't coming off. So then I used a dado blade and then just set it to just above the laminate, ran it through all 4 corners because I figured the epoxy kind of leaked in on each side. And then finally tried it again here. You can see it's finally starting to release after a lot of effort on this. So, and I was worried about going too fast on it, so I just went around all the edges, flipped it over. We just went really slowly, just finally got it off. And it wasn't too bad underneath. You can see where the dado scored it just slightly. Wasn't too bad, but it was enough. I know I had to sand all this, and there was just a little bit of laminate that needed to be sanded. So got that all down and then used mineral spirits the same way just to kind of clean it off and get it all clean and also get a look at the grain here. And then it was mostly roughly sanded, so then I went through and lined up all the dimensions for the final cut and used the track saw to go through and cut all 4 sides down to the final dimensions of what I wanted the tabletop to be. And then went on to sanding. So this was great fun. So I had originally started off with 60 and went to 80, 120, 150. Actually went up to 220 just because I wanted to make the epoxy a little bit smoother than normal. But I used the ETS sander here just to make a better work of it. Just sanding both the sides, and then I used compressed air between each grit to make sure everything was clean and try to avoid or reduce any swirls. You can see there's a little bit of swirls here, but the routing and the sanding kind of chunked out a couple of the places here, so I just had to go do some small fixes. So after I got done with the sanding, I wanted to drill the holes so how I'm going to attach it to the base. I'm going to use these Z clips, which sit into a groove on the actual table portion of it, the base, and then they screw into the tabletop. So those, you can see that part that sits up is what's going to go into these little grooves. You can't see them; they're actually hidden, which made it nice. So they're just hidden behind this support, and then there's some on the back one. So you can see it if you look really, really close and up in there. But after I got all that done, it was finally time to put the finish on here. And this is the best part, where you finally get to see the epoxy clear through. So you can see it's kind of swirled and clear, or milky. But as soon as you get the Rubio Monocoat finish across it, you can see the details in it. So it was finally exciting to get to see all that, because you just see it's all cloudy before this. And I mentioned I went up to 220 grit, so I just wanted to make sure with the applicator pad that I just kind of worked it into the grain really well. This is actually the underside of it, but I wanted to make sure, test it out and see how it went. And this is the final product. Just kind of saved it for the reveal here. So this is the top. It's all attached, everything. I do a final dust off of it. And then, again, this is what it looks like. This is the final with the drawer attached, the top attached. Came out really well. I was really happy. I like the pattern of the walnut. Not a big fan of river tables, but this was it's kind of adds some interesting feature, and this is what my daughter wanted. So this is what we did. You can see the grain really pops on here. And so we had that little open area above the drawer, nice little storage area. And I love that back left part. You can actually see the rings of the wood. It's pretty amazing. And then here you can actually see from underneath, you can see the fish. You can actually see them from the top. But it's kind of interesting to see and kind of fun little feature kids love. And so again, here's the drawer was a poplar inside, which is shown in the other videos. But overall, came out really well. My daughter's really happy with it. I'm happy with it as well. Added that brass handle onto it, and it turned out really good.